Just when he lies down in his chair after setting his course for South America, he hears a knock at his door. It's Russell, a young wilderness explorer who has pestered Carl the day before in an attempt to earn his final merit badge for assisting the elderly and become a senior wilderness explorer. He was looking for a creature named a snake that Carl had made up to get him to leave when he accidentally got caught onto the house as it floated away. Carl lets him come inside and he starts obnoxiously looking around the house. Carl decides to abort his mission and cut balloons from his fireplace and land the house. However, they enter a fierce thunderstorm, tossing the house through the clouds. Carl gathered all his belongings, tied them down, and eventually passed out from exhaustion. Russell wakes Carl up to tell him that he steered the house and that they were in South America using a GPS. Soon after, Russell accidentally tosses his GPS out the window. Carl decides to land the house and try to send Russell home. They go out to the front porch. Carl expects the house to take several hours to reach the ground, but soon finds that they are much closer to the ground than he thought. The house suddenly hits the ground, tossing Carl and Russell from the porch. Carl manages to grab onto a dangling hose to stop the house from floating away, and Russell grabs onto Carl's leg, further weighing the house down. Coated in fog, they are dragged to the edge of a seemingly endless cliff. Russell pulls Carl and the house back to safety soon after the fog clears, and Carl begins to look around the extraordinary landscape. He soon notices the astonishing view of Paradise Falls. They made it! Carl orders Russell to climb up the hose to the house and hoist him up. However, Russell barely makes it up the hose at all, and the option of getting up to the house is thrown out. Carl becomes outraged, but Russell comes up with the bright idea to walk the house to the falls. Once they're in the jungle, Russell needs a bathroom break. He finds what he thinks are snipe tracks and encounters a giant chocolate-loving bird. He brings it back to Carl, who is absolutely terrified. Though friendly with Russell, the bird is obnoxious towards Carl. Russell becomes attached and names it Kevin, but Carl just wants to move on. Russell leaves a trail of chocolate for Kevin to follow. Soon, Carl and Russell find themselves in a strange rocky area. Soon they come across a lone dog with a strange collar. Carl calls it for its owner, but Russell just plays with it. Soon it begins to speak to them. The dog introduces to himself as Doug. He says the collar, which allows him to speak, was made by his good and smart master. Soon Kevin comes along and pounces on Doug, who urges Carl and Russell to allow him to take Kevin to his prisoner, Carl, thinking it's just a weird trick, urges Russell to come up with him and move on. Meanwhile, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are dogs with collars like Doug and are searching for a bird as well. Alpha has a problem with his collar, which makes his voice high-pitched like a chipmunk. Turns out that these dogs sent Doug on a special mission to find the bird, just so they could get rid of him, realizing they could get in trouble with their master for losing Doug. They start a video transmission with him through their collars. They are shocked to find that Doug has found the bird and has taken it as his prisoner. Doug abruptly cuts off the transmission when Russell comes on the screen. Confused, they use the trackers on their collars to find Doug. As Carl and Russell continue their way through the jungle, Carl ditches Doug and Kevin with a tennis ball and a piece of chocolate, respectively. Doug and Kevin eventually return with Doug holding the same tennis ball that Carl threw. Night falls, and it begins to rain. Doug and Kevin fall asleep while Russell struggles to build a tent but cannot do it. Russell explains to Carl that he's never been camping before, but his divorced father promised Russell that he would come to his ceremony when he becomes a senior wilderness explorer. Carl feels bad for treating him so badly, realizing that he had never had an adventure even though he was part of Ellie's adventure club. Russell makes Carl cross his heart that Kevin can come with them on their adventure. The rain stops and the clear night sky came into view. He sends Russell to sleep, thinking about all he had been through today. Carl wakes up in the morning to find Kevin gone. Russell and Doug are in panic, but soon they see the bird on the roof of his house with a pile of food. Doug explains that Kevin is collecting food for her babies, which leads Russell to realize that Kevin was a girl the whole time. Kevin called for her babies, and a faint peeping could be heard. Kevin runs to her babies and leaves. Carl forces Doug and Russell along, leaving the latter depressed. As they're walking, they encounter Alpha, Gamma, and Beta. Doug leaks out that he lost the bird, and the rest of the dogs force Carl and Russell to come along with Doug to their master. The dogs bring Carl and Russell to a giant cave. Inside are dozens of dogs, all with special collars. Out from the shadows comes an elderly but fit man. The man apologizes for getting Carl into the situation and gives them a goodbye. After a moment, though Carl calls the man again, he discovers the man, the dog's master, is actually Charles Muntz. Glad to see a fan of his, Muntz invites Carl and Russell inside the cave where Muntz's dirigible, the Spirit of Adventure, is stationed. Carl and Russell park the house beside the cave and enter the dirigible as Doug gets the cone of shame, a giant funnel put on his head for his wrongdoings. Carl is in awe at all of the treasures that Muntz had collected in the dirigible's trophy room.